this thing was halting up, and it's different than the last setup because it was halting up huge. It's a fairly recent IPO, much more volume and much higher percentage than the last one. But I like this level here to risk off of.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today we have a very special guest. He's been trading for quite some time, and he recently made the transition to full-time day trading, and we're going to learn about his story today. Sellers, welcome to the show, bro.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. So I'm very anxious to dive in here and learn about your story. So if you could just start off by letting us know what got you into trading to begin with. Was this something that's always been on your mind as a kid?
Yeah, man. So when I was a kid, my dad he traded a little bit. He had a pretty good run for a while. And after my parents got divorced, I think it kind of went south for him. But yeah, he did pretty good. And then I got a little older. I worked construction for a long time. I was a welder. And I just got to where I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do forever. Um, I had a buddy telling me to invest in Bitcoin in like 2017, and I did, and that was like my first any any kind of putting my feet into it. That's what it was. I bought like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Just got lucky, put a few $1,000 in there, and made like 12 grand. Just had no idea what I was doing. So I was like, then you get bit by the bug. That was,
Oh yeah.
um, and I don't mess with crypto anymore. But after that, I just played around for a few years. By about 2019, I got really serious. Um, I started focusing in on small caps. I had some early luck, like a lot of people do. Then come 2020, it really took off. I knew enough to make quite a bit of money really quick, and that was a blessing and a curse. But
Yeah.
it it's worked out now. There was a lot of trials and tribulations with that, though. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So I'm curious to go back a little bit. So you were in construction. You kind of struck gold with crypto. When I mean gold, like you had no idea what you were doing, and you just jumped in and made some money, and that kind of got you the itch. What did you do right after that, though? Like after you got that itch, did you immediately start learning technicals? Like what did you do? Like did you already have a buddy trying to teach you? Like how did you start learning?
Yeah, it's funny because I got the itch, but I wasn't totally convinced. I thought I just got really lucky because I've always been very skeptical, um, and so I really just used that money. I put a little bit into like a Robinhood account or so, it was something like that back then, and just played around a little bit. But I don't know. Another year went on of me just playing around, I wasn't really making anything, losing anything. I really started getting tired of welding and just being out in the heat all the time, and so I started watching YouTube videos and pushing, and uh, I remember I started having a couple of big wins. I would just swing stuff long overnight, stuff that was running up end of day. I got lucky a few times, but it wasn't until about a year or so after that I got real serious. Most people jump in immediately, but I'd say 18, 19 is when I started really jumping in.
And what did you do in 1819 to jump in? Like how did you start learning?
Uh, just invested, I'll say invested, put enough capital that it hurt when I lost it into an account, and pretty much just trials through pain. That's been the whole story for me. It was a lot of pain. Uh, if I remember, I was probably up about 4 or 5 thousand bucks in a year. Just
Yep.
doing it off my phone at work, and then I'd come and look at the computer at night. But yeah, I was trying to learn technicals, trying to learn how to go long. I didn't really know about going short, and I'd say I just went through a lot of pain and money losing. That was my way of learning then. but it was minuscule compared to a year or two after that.
So 18, 19, you were just kind of just winging it. You're just throwing money at it,
Yep.
getting lucky here and there, making money, losing money, and all that pain kind of pushed you, I'm guessing, to start learning a process, or
Yeah,
like what did that pain push you to do?
yeah, man. It pushed me to really start putting some time and effort into learning technicals, which and you know, just basic fundamentals about companies and things like that. I've always gravitated towards small caps, and the I call it pain. You know, I was really just being kind of a gambler,
Yeah,
somewhat.
yeah.
But after that, I started really learning setups, technicals, trying to find an edge. I didn't even know to call it an edge at that point. I just was really just searching for what I needed to do. Uh,
How'd you find it? Like, what were you like when you say searching? Like, what were you? What was your process to search? Like, what were you doing?
a lot of YouTube videos. I had no idea about uh, Twitter day traders at the time. But I got on that Stock Twits website. I would just watch the Tim Sykes videos and all kinds of stuff like that on YouTube. Try something, it didn't work, I'd journal it. I've got all these old journals over here that I used to just paper journal everything, and just kept trying and trying and trying with small amounts of money, and then I ended up getting a pretty consistent process down. It still wasn't great. I just had terrible risk management, I think is what it was. I learned to process pretty quick, but my risk management was not on point for a long time.
Hey, we wouldn't be able to do these face-to-face interviews if it wasn't for our sponsor, Cobra Trading. So if you can just give them a few seconds of your time, we'd really appreciate it. Cobra Trading is the go-to broker for day traders and short sellers. And I'm not the only one saying this. In fact, Benzinga awarded Cobra Trading as the go-to broker for short selling. They have a heavy focus on direct market access order routing, so you have the fastest execution. They have some of the best locate prices and availability. They also have amazing customer service. I've experienced many different brokers, and it's why I use them every single day and why I'm proud to have them as our sponsor. Sign up now by clicking the Be the Trader referral link below and earn 1 free month of software with Cobra and 25% off all commissions. Now let's get back to the show.
What was the process that you learned through those trials and tribulations when you were studying, looking at videos? Because it's pretty amazing to me that you were watching mostly like videos that are free online, because a lot of people, they're thinking that you have to always buy a course. So I'm just very curious, like, it sounds like you did learn most of it from like free online resources. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much the majority of everything. I've paid for a couple of chat rooms just in the past year or two, just to learn some good technical stuff from some guys I've met on Twitter. But I'm not currently in any kind of paid chat room or anything like that. I just I guess to answer your question, I was learning how to go long on small caps, different strategies, like a morning dip pattern, you know, on a gapper,
Yep.
something that would dip down to like a certain key area that I would consider where I could buy it, using different indicators like RSI and stuff like that to try to pinpoint a dip buy long and sell it pretty quick into the bounce. And that was that, and like an overnight long on like a multi-day runner. That was really my only strategies at the time.
And so, just for those who are not sure what RSI means, just give us a short, like, what does it mean to you? Like, how can someone use RSI?
Yeah, it's a relative strength index, and it's something I've always used. Basically, you can set the parameters. I just like a basic under 30 and over 70. That's like over 70 being overbought and under 30 being oversold. I'd use a 1 minute chart and just look for a deep pull down under 30, and that was that, and like a semi key level on a 1 minute chart from the pre-market to then. That was a decent long strategy for me. Kind of basically like what what somebody wanting to short a gap and crap, something that gaps up, dies, and then rips up to VWAP it open. It's the same thing, but just kind of reverse engineered.
You know what's interesting about that? I have to ask you this. So, were there times that you were using RSI at the beginning of your journey where it kind of like messed up your head a little bit? Like you started to buy, like maybe you wouldn't buy something that was overbought or sell something that was oversold, or if you like, is there any like caveats to using an indicator like that?
I really think that you've got to take volume into account with it. Because if something's selling off with a lot of volume, it's like Silicon Valley Bank, for example, which wasn't a small cap, but that thing was selling off. It was burying the RSI, but it had so much selling volume. See, it kind of cancels it out. That's another thing big in my trading now is confluence, and
Yeah.
I'm not so much a long trader anymore, especially not in small caps. I think all of that, just the inconsistencies and stuff, I wasn't able to find as many confluences. That's what led me to becoming a short seller mostly.
Oh, gotcha. So getting back on track here, because I took you on a tangent.
No, it's fine.
So in 2000, 18, 19, you started to get more serious. You started to learn from free resources, and you gravitated towards small caps. And at first, you were long bias. So how long were you long bias, and when did you make the switch to primarily short?
I'd say into about 2020, and then to mid 21, I was mostly just going long. I was using what broker was it? I was using Trade Zero, and I would try to go short every now and then, but I really didn't understand it. That's the only reason I got Trade Zero was I just had a PD, an over PDT account. I had grown it to that, and I wanted the ability to do it, but I still didn't understand it. So I just was sticking to what I knew, but it wasn't the consistency I wanted, and I just started seeing that the more profitable and statistical way for me to do this would be to short sell small caps.
So two things come to mind though. Number one, because you brought up like you grew the account over PDT, so I know people are like, well, what did you start with? Like, what did you start with? Like, can you tell us about that journey? Like, was it multiple accounts? Was it one account?
Many accounts. I think the first account I ever funded, like for trading small caps and stuff, was about, I think it was probably like $2,500. I grew that one up to like $4,000. Then blew it up in a week. And I just kept funding small accounts until I don't know how many it was. Back then I wasn't really tracking how much money I was spending, to how much of my own,
I understand,
hard earned capital I was putting into these accounts. But I'd say I think I started over with between $1,500 and $2,500 every time. The last time though was when I grew it up to about $9,000, something like that, and I just used my couple of little day trades, and then one day I decided, it was when GameStop was running.
Yep.
I liked sympathy plays. That was something I always looked into, and I saw people talking about AMC. I was like, this could be something similar. I went all in the entire account and held it overnight, and the next day I woke up, and this is very early in that whole, this is like the end of 2020, I think, whenever it was, when it ran from like $3 to, over, I don't remember what it was the next day.
It was a dumb number.
All I know is I woke up the next morning at like 5 a.m. and I had a $26,000 account. That was a good feeling, man.
I bet that was.
Oh
man. I bet
that next day I was day trading literally all, like, man, I didn't make any money, but I was just, going nuts. I was going nuts. It was my first time ever over PDT. I was like, this is crazy,
Oh, couple of things stand out to me though. Is it's like number one, sympathy plays. Could you explain what that is and how people can learn from that? Because I think that's really important. I think a lot of people don't quite understand what that means.
Yeah, so I mean, a sympathy play, just like with AMC being a sympathy to GameStop. Sometimes you can find something similar, and it will be less crowded, which that might be better for you. Maybe less games. I mean, I remember there was like back then. I remember there was a company called like Ear Running, and because it ran, there was one called like Eyes Running or something like that. It was just
I remember
it would
that.
just be. Just anything like that. If it seems similar, people might trade it as well. It might get volume. It's
It's like because the masses are not really educated in the finance world,
right.
and so like there's been times in the finance world where like something's happening in the real world. Let's just say I'm making this up right here, but let's just say it's something about technology on lip balm. Okay, something dumb, right? And then all of a sudden, everyone is looking for a ticker that's called lip. And everyone's just buying lip, and it has nothing to do with lip balm at all. It has nothing to do with lip balm. And that's what usually can happen. And the sympathy, which you're talking about, is like another one could be called balm. And that could follow with it. So it's just insane how this can happen in the market. And it's considered kind of like a glitch. It's like completely false. Nothing makes sense, but it's working. So I'm glad you shared that. And what's interesting, sellers, is you said something that really stood out to me that I think a lot of people are probably going to either walk over, but I want to hit it on again. You said, I didn't really keep track of how many accounts that I lost. And I love that you said that because that tells me that you were going, you're doing this. Like, I'm doing this. Like, I'm going to get this and I'm going to keep going at it. I'm not going to keep track of everything that's holding me back because it could really hold you back. Like, oh, I blew, because I hear people DM me all the time, probably you too. And they're like, I blew up 10 accounts. Like, I'm never going to get this. Like, don't worry about that, right? You need to focus on the growth that you're getting every time because this is very hard.
This is the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And, I'm several years into it now. I'm no veteran by any means, but there was never any doubt in my mind that this wasn't what I was going to do. You know what I mean? From like about a year in, a year in of being serious, 18, 19 area, I knew I don't care how much money it takes. And I would estimate now that, it's not even an estimate. I know about how much money it cost me to become profitable. And it was around $150,000 of real money.
Yep. And that's something that everyone needs to pay attention to too. Like, number one, it's all about relative. It's relative, right? Like for sellers, he had that money to blow. He did. For someone else, that could be 5,000, meaning you only blow a lot of $100 accounts or $200 accounts or $500 accounts. Like, don't worry about the amount. I don't want everyone to get lost in that. I want you guys to know, like, it's all relative. Like, if I make $1 million a year, which I don't, but if I did, and then all of a sudden I'm losing $100,000 every year, to someone that might be ridiculous, but to me it might be nothing, right? So just always understand it's relative.
And I will say too, I did not really have $150,000 to lose. I did lose it, but man, I did not do it the right way. I got myself in all kinds of serious trouble, man. Like, I won't lie, man. I put my family, like my little family, through some tough times, man. Because we've got, I've got my wife and my son, another one on the way. But man, on the journey there was some times where we were scraping by, man, like barely able to pay the mortgage and stuff. It was bad. I don't come from a lot of money, but so I guess that makes it, when you don't really have a fallback plan, it'll make you push that much harder.
How'd you do that, man? Because there's so many people who have a family and it's hard for them. I mean, it's very hard to pursue something as risky as trading. Like, how'd you go through that? Like, how did you and your wife communicate through that? Because I've shared my journey where it was tough for me and my wife, like really tough. So like, I don't know if you're open to sharing, like, how'd you get through that period? How long was that period?
Man, my wife has been extremely supportive. Uh, I mean, there was a couple of times where it was like I'd get my I'd get like my tax return and it'd be pretty big, and she'd make a comment like, "All right, well, let's put some of that money away before you trade it all away," and stuff like that. But I think she always believed in me. She's probably the only one. My dad, he kind of did. My mom, very against it. I mean, it's been a damper on our relationship to this day. Um,
Oh man.
but
Okay.
I'm not upset. We're fine. It's just she
Yeah.
just she saw my dad do it, and he had some early success and then lost a lot, and I think that it
It's like a trigger
yeah,
for her.
yeah, exactly. I think it is. But she knows I'm stubborn on the fact that if I'm gonna do something, you can't tell me otherwise. Like, you know, um, but yeah, it was it wasn't easy at all. My wife,
Any advice to anyone out there who's gonna pursue this?
I mean, it's kind of cliche. It's the stuff you always hear, but really consider the risk and just put your risk management at the number one thing from the get go. Don't always consider the downside. Don't take out a personal loan. Don't ever do that. I've done that before. It's not smart.
Mm.
I mean, I'll be honest. I did it before. It's not good.
Can you explain that? Why is it not good?
I mean, just because if you're trading with money you don't have, I mean, even I had a well-paying job, but I did work my ass off. It it's just gonna make everything tougher. Just you're better off just save up enough, a small account, and just consider it. Consider, there's such a. Me and Craig talk about this all the time. My trading partner, we there's such a like a we get like so pulled away from what real world money is when we trade, because in the morning times it's nothing for us to be down a few $100, and we're just like, okay, whatever, or maybe even 1,000 sometimes, and you're just like, whatever. I mean, this is fine. But if you're thinking about like, okay, you just set $1,000 on fire, at 8 o'clock or 8 o'clock here, 8:30 here in the morning, that's not, think about how that would be in real life. I mean, think about when you go out to eat at dinner or something like that. Just consider the money, how it really feels. And I think it's easier to feel that when you first get started. So just don't lose that. Don't lose track of the, trading money and real world money. It's the same thing.
Going back to your story though, you said you bought AMC because you saw a sympathy play and happening. You went all in. Please tell people like that, like give them a warning on that. Like going all in on anything.
Don't do that. That was
You got lucky. I mean, it was a great play. I definitely saw it. Like the sympathy, I get it. But like even all in on anything.
Oh, I know, man. And I had at the time I had a good bit of extra money outside of the market. I don't ever recommend going all in, especially in this current market situation that we're in.
It's hard.
I'd been trading not long, but long enough to recognize that this was a very unique time to be trading. The 2020, 2021 era. You could get away with a lot more then. You can't do it now. So don't do that. Don't be reckless. Capital preservation is going to be the name of the game. You've got to have an edge. You got to preserve your capital. You got to have mental stamina, but yeah, don't do stuff like that. That wasn't smart. I got lucky. I had a few lucky breaks in the beginning, but it all came back to bite me in the butt.
So you hit PDT and you start trading like crazy. Like after you hit PDT, like what happens? Are you like successful? Like what happens?
Yeah,
after
I was pretty like wildly successful there for a while. I think within that amount of time, within a couple of months, I was up six figures. And yeah,
That's
I mean,
fast,
it wasn't
man.
huge. But like, because I'm at the same time I'm watching guys like Jack come up, and He was a little younger than me. I was like, man, I got to lap this guy. I would watch his videos, and the next thing you know, he is just way ahead of me. Which, I mean, he doesn't even know who I am. I wasn't in any kind of groups or anything. I just watched him. But yeah, I was pretty successful for a while. I had some drawdowns, but I was taking a lot of money out, like, you know, buying a brand new truck, and I spent a good bit of it. So that wasn't great. I'm a lot more frugal now.
Why? What'd you learn from that?
Man, just that if you're gonna do this, and you're really gonna try to make this your career, you've got to consider so many things. Like, family insurance is ridiculously expensive. You don't want to run into a situation where you're really nervous, because you always want to be fairly calm when you're trading. I mean, I'm guilty of losing my cool sometimes, but you've got to keep a lot of what you make, because there's a lot of unknowns in this game, and there's a huge factor of randomness. So you never know. Something could take you out of the game. So you need to have a backup, like a nest egg, I guess. Especially if you've had some early success. If you've made $100,000, keep 30 in your account. I think that's plenty to trade with. If you can't trade with 30, then you don't need to trade with 100.
I love that you say that, because like so many people do spend what they make right away because they're excited, and then they forget about taxes and all the other stuff that's going to come up
That's
later.
another good one.
And then they gotta
That's another.
yeah, right. And then they gotta pull that out of their account, and now their account's going down more. And then you're right. Like, if you're in the wrong mindset, like you said, if you're under any type of stress trading, it's going to make trading so much harder.
Yeah, really bad. That kind of is what happened to me in like 21. I think I was trading with like a 50K account, and I was pretty much just, I mean, I'd long some stuff, but my main strategies, I was short selling stuff, like big parabolic moves. I had a ton of different setups that I still use today for shorting, and I went on to, like I said, I'd spent a good bit of the money I had, but I still had some money outside of this, and I had about 50K in an account. I'll never forget this one day I was shorting, I think it was like XTNT or something. It was some Amex stock. It had gapped up, and then it made like a second push to a lower high. Something I like to short sometimes, and man, it just went way further than I thought. And this is back when I would just add into a short. I wound up being in it pretty huge. I mean, I'd use leverage all the time. Have a 50K account, I might be in something $90,000 worth. I was doing real reckless stuff, but I thought I had it in the bag. I did that, and it came back down to where I was only down about $1,000. I was like, oh, I'm gonna make a killing on this. Next thing you know, this thing starts gapping back up. I just froze. And in about the next 10 minutes, I had added in so much that they're liquidating me for like 32 grand.
Can you explain what liquidation means?
Well,
right?
I was in so much leverage that it left me with like $12,000. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was that was a terrible feeling.
And this is after you've already found some success. You were consistent. Yep. You were doing well. And this is what I want people to know. Like, black swans, things happen. So what have you learned from that? Because I know you mentioned earlier in our conversation, like, as you've been getting better, you went through a big hot streak, and then you learned some lessons. And then you became what I consider now, like, you're more knowledgeable, you're more careful, it seems like. Your more risk management approach is more in tune. Could you explain what you've learned from those
risk
experiences?
management is the name of the game. You have to have risk management. And anybody that tells me that they don't have a broker max loss set through their broker, I'm just like, well, I mean, man, you were really just a ticking time bomb, in my opinion, especially if you short sell small caps with any kind of size. I like to take pretty decent size on some of my setups. So I've got a fairly conservative broker max loss. It sucks to hit it. I've hit it a few times this year, several times. And I've actually raised it this year because I've had a pretty good year. People will say, oh, I control my emotions perfectly and blah blah blah. But then you get them alone in a room and talk to them, and they're like, oh yeah, man, I lose control all the time, and I can't, I mean, I think anybody that says they haven't done that is lying. I think there's a lot of people that do. I'm
Yeah.
not calling anybody out. I'll tell you right now, I've been so many times where I've been at the desk, completely lost control before I had a broker max loss set, either ruin a whole week, or I mean, I've ruined a whole year before, So I think that's one of the biggest things you'll learn is you've got to know when you're wrong. You've got to respect it, and for those times when you just can't respect it, you've got to have the broker step in. You need to call them, set it up. I mean, most good brokers, like I know we both use Cobra. Set it, call them, and say, hey, look, I don't care what I do. If I call you guys and say, hey, please unlock my account, I got to get this back. No, have them say, hell no, just yeah, have them hang up on you. I mean, really, like tell them you've got to have that. Get as extreme as you want with it, but you've got to do that. You can ruin your life.
You got to protect you from
exactly,
you,
and
man.
that was the hardest thing for me to learn. I feel like it was pretty easy for me to find an edge. I say pretty easy. It only took me a couple of years. I got consistent fairly quick, but the hardest thing for me to do was protect me from me.
So before, I want to ask a couple more things too, man. And for those who are listening, well, let me ask you, Sellers, are you willing to share a chart example of like an example of like a
Yes.
chart that you really love a little later? Okay. So before we dive into the chart example, the edge, because you said earlier that most of your journaling was on journals, like you actually wrote them down, you had tons of journals, right? So how did you discover your edge? Like, how did you find your edge with the way you were tracking? Unless you tracked another way and I just didn't find out until now. So just
so
curious.
with that, if it was a particular setup like a gapper setup short, or like the dip and rip type long, I would just highlight it, and if it was just a rando trade, I'd say that, or if it was one of my setups, I'd write down what setup it was, and then I'd just put a few specifics like what time of day it happened, the float, the exchange it was traded on, and the volume on the day, and the price of the ticker, just a couple little key things like that. And I eventually transitioned over to Excel and like Google Sheets and started doing it on there. Yeah, I feel like that's a good way to track it. Now, if I would have known how good some of these journaling softwares are, man, I would have. It's totally. I mean, what is it? $30-$40 maybe. Do that.
Yeah, it's totally
I
worth
mean, I'll
it,
show
man.
you right here. Like, I've got piles and piles of books, like this, where I was just writing down all kinds of stuff. Just man, like day in and day out, always just filling it full, writing down stuff. And man, I'm so glad I don't do it like this anymore.
Yeah. Using journal software, everyone, is the way to go. Like Sellers is saying, we'll have links below of journal software that you can choose from. But on top of that, man, you mentioned a couple of things I know people may not be aware of, like max loss, broker max loss, like what that is. All brokers offer that. So, if you don't mind explaining what that is. And then I believe you also mentioned something of deer in the headlights. And what is amazing to me, I'm so guilty of this. I used to hear people say that, man, and I'd be like, that's never going to happen to me. and hey, I'm going to tell you right now, if you trade long enough, it's going to happen. So have a stop loss, right? So could you explain like the broker max loss?
So broker max loss, just to put it simply, is just where you have a set amount of money, capital, whatever, that you are willing, the absolute most you are willing to lose on that day, and you set it up with your broker, however they want you to do it, where you let them know, hey, I want to lose. I do not ever want to lose more than X amount. If it's $5,000, $2,000, up $100, whatever, just call
Yep.
them. Some of them you can set it up through the platform directly. Just do that. Find a conservative number. I'd say, you know, no more than 2 or 3 days worth of profits from a good week. Set it at that and just trade around the fact that you don't ever need to be getting close to that. If your broker max loss is $2,500 and you're down, $500 or $600 on a position, you're probably pushing it a little too hard. But that might be cool with some people. I mean, I hit like a half max loss on Friday, or either Friday or Thursday, but you just have that max loss in mind. Whatever it is, whatever percent of your account you would be cool with losing with an absolute worst case scenario situation, and just set it at that. I mean, you've got to, because if you don't, you could have something like one of these crazy halters, especially if you're a short seller, something crazy like, for example, ILAG last year, that Chinese stock. I mean, I remember seeing so many people started implementing a broker max loss after that. I remember David Hanlon posted that he lost like 800 grand, or like liquidated his entire account in that one move. You know, and I've heard some people say that the broker max loss might not have saved you in that situation, but I'm sure with the great risk management technology with most of these brokers, especially Cobra, they could have at least got you out somewhere reasonable, way ahead of that.
Way
Yeah,
ahead of
because
time. Way
like
ahead
you
of time.
said, deer in the headlights, man.
100%. So, if you don't mind taking a moment, sharing your screen here and showing us some of the, like, either an example of a setup that you really like, and then maybe that black swan event, like one stock that you need to be aware of can happen.
I've
like
got
that
two
can wipe
great
you out.
ones in mind. Can you see this pretty decently?
Yep,
So
I can.
this is a setup
Go
that
ahead.
I like to trade now. It's a lot less crowded, as you can see from the volume here. It's low volume. It's a big spike, and I believe this one halted. And the way I like to trade these, I have a scanner set up for them, a parabolic scanner. So big spike up, preferably into some kind of resistance, whether it be daily, hourly, or just some prior areas from a few days before. I like there to be some volume on those areas, so there's probably people bag holding it, whatever you want to call it, long, and then it preferably fails and has a lower high, and I'll hammer that. It's not a big percentage spike, and then I have some areas that I cover into, some EMAs I use, and so that is an example of one of my favorite setups. It's just a low volume, 20 to 30% parabolic short.
What's interesting? I know people are asking right now, like, do you know that's going to be a lower high, or are you just playing it?
Well,
Like,
so
is there
I've always heard,
certainty
and I heard
in
it
this
from
play?
Stan, is that good short sellers don't anticipate resistance. They wait to see that resistance works. So there was a little level here, I think on the 1 hour, and I wasn't really paying
Okay.
too much attention to it. I just had it kind of on the back burner watching, because this is a relatively recent IPO. I won't trade like an IPO with no chart history, just off of stats. I won't do that, but I will trade one if it's got a little bit of chart history. There's got to be some levels for me to risk off of. So this fails off this level, and no, I don't know that it's not going to push higher, but the volume and my stats that I have from back testing on this setup, this is my most profitable setup for the past 2 years. I like it. I hope it doesn't get overcrowded, but it's not for the lighthearted, because you've got to be ready to stop out quick, especially if you hit these with size. I hit these with quite a bit of size. I feel like I'm not anticipating resistance because it already proved to me that it was going to fail here around $2. So I'm getting in, risking 15, 20 cents,
Yep.
to make quite a bit more than that. To me, that's a good setup.
Yep. Understand.
And then there's another setup similar. I'll pull it up real quick. So this was one of my biggest trades last year. On this day right here, it was in summertime last year. This thing was halting up, and it's different than the last setup because it was halting up huge. It's a fairly recent IPO, much more volume and much higher percentage than the last one, but I like this level here to risk off of. I went huge on this play, and this thing absolutely died. It was ridiculous, but to me it's just obvious.
Yeah.
There's this big level here. It's had a little bit of volume on it. It's not been able to break through it prior. That one was like a no-brainer short to me, and it just so happened that I think it tanked like $5 that day. Yeah, it was huge.
And that level there is resistance for everyone who's not aware. When he's mentioned resistance earlier, resistance is just a prior level that hasn't been breached, maybe in the past couple of days, maybe it has good volume, maybe it's been tested, maybe it kind of breached but not really broke through and held. So just FYI. But no, I appreciate you sharing this, man. That's a big move,
man.
and it just completely
it's down
melts
like
it completely
sub
melts
50 cents now. But yeah, and sometimes support becomes resistance. I'll short into that sometimes. Like if there had been a support level here where it couldn't break under that, but then it did, and it bounced back up to it, and there was a solid support level with volume. Most of my setups for shorts, I don't just blindly short a spot because it went there before. There's got to at least be some volume there most of the time. I mean, I'll make exceptions, but I like confluence.
I appreciate you sharing these with us, my man. I know a lot of people are going to get a lot of value from this episode, and they're probably going to wonder how can they reach out to you or find out more about you. So could you share with everyone, where they can find more information about yourself?
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter now. It used to be at Sellers Elkins, which is just my name. I've got an odd name. Now it's at Short Sellers, short _ SELLERS. So you can follow me on there. I just made the Twitter account this week. I've also got my Discord handle. It's just Sellers _ so you can add me on there. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Pretty much if you search Sellers Elkins. I don't think anybody else has that name.
I don't think so either, brother. And you know what, man? If you reach out to Sellers, I know he's a great guy, and he's willing to talk to a lot of people. So again, feel free to reach out to him. And again, thank you for watching the show. And Sellers, thank you for being here, bro.